Let's start with a very interesting story from How Am I Still Alive? 25. Stay in a receptionist's place? Okay. Context: I worked front desk at an optical store for 2 years. I had no experience and knew nothing about eye health when I started. Over time, I learned to do contact lens training, how to work the machine for glaucoma testing, visual field testing, how to adjust glasses, and a little bit about sales. There was a fire and we had to relocate, which brought on a lot of stress to boss lady. We'll call her ma'am. We ended up losing our tech who did the contact lens trainings and visual fields and our lead optician. Being the type of person who doesn't like to see others struggle, I always offered to help whenever I could, especially if the patient was nice. When we reopened, ma'am's husband came to work at the office as manager, which at the time I thought was nice because I'm sure she needed the extra support. We'll call him Sir. He knew nothing about optical, so he was also training while managing. The problems started on opening day with Sir and I. He wanted to play meditation music and forest sounds. Everyone else wanted general pop and regular music. Since I had access to the speaker, I would adjust it for them. He loved the new space. I missed the old space, but never spoke bad about the new one. If the office was busy and a pair of glasses needed to be adjusted, I'd offer or be asked to help, and in front of the patient he'd yell, "Do you know what you're doing?" One time I turned to him and said, "I've been doing it longer than you." I'm sure he didn't like that, LOL. We had a meeting where he had no bad comments about my work but told me I make him want to leave, LOL. He would report every word and minor mistake I made to ma'am, and she would send me random texts about them outside of work hours. I never got in trouble for anything, but it was annoying AF. Story: on one particular day, I was doing mostly contact lenses trainings, and a patient called about a contact lens being stuck in her eye. These were considered emergencies, so I told her to come in and see the doctor, ma'am. When the patient came in, she looked really uncomfortable and asked how long until she's seen. I offered to take a look until she could see the doctor. When I took her to the back, I tried taking out the lens and couldn't find anything. I told her this, and she looked discouraged. I said to her, "I don't see or feel anything, so you'd be better off waiting for the doctor, and that ain't me." She laughed it off. I told her I'd been doing trainings all day and was hoping to help her and apologized. She said it was okay and sat in the front. Apparently, she went into the room and ma'am told her there were no contacts in her eyes. The patient said that the nurse told her there's a lens in her eye and she wanted ma'am to double check. Ma'am was really upset about this because she had to spend extra time explaining to the patient that I was nothing more than a receptionist. When she came out, she made sure to berate me in front of the patient and my coworkers. I just nodded and apologized. Even after work, she pulled me aside to ask what I said to the patient, and I told her every word. Still, she felt the need to tell me that I make her job harder by misinforming patients. She said I should stay at a receptionist level and not help anyone because it causes trouble. I was shocked by how she spoke down to me, and still believed that I told the patient I was a nurse and she had something in her eye. All I could muster up was, "Okay, I'm really sorry about that." After that day, I no longer did contact lens trainings, so now appointments are 4 to 5 weeks out instead of 1. I no longer assisted in visual field tests. I put them all on her schedule. Now we don't have any availability for regular appointments until a month and a half later. I stopped offering to help opticians, so if one person was scheduled, all patients will have to wait for that one person for all adjustments, orders, and dispenses. That one had patients up their asses with complaints, LOL. If anyone had a question about anything unrelated to front desk, I couldn't help them. Even when she would ask, I just told her I didn't feel comfortable doing anything outside of reception anymore. I eventually quit and now work somewhere with a much higher pay and benefits. They've lost a total of 5 out of 11 employees in the span of 1 year, and I heard 2 more are quitting before the end of the year. Edit: the tech didn't die, they quit. Edit 2. To the people saying I shouldn't have been doing anything I wasn't certified for, you're right, but that isn't how the business was ran. I think people were hired based on past experiences and aspirations, whether or not they were likely to stay long. The only licensed people in that office were the optometrists. The opticians in previous tech were not licensed or certified in any way. They still did trainings, visual fields, started dilations, etc. They cross-trained as many of us as possible to maintain productivity. The malicious compliance was executed flawlessly, quiet, professional, and devastating. By doing only what was asked, OP exposed how much they relied on her extra efforts. Productivity tanked, Patients were frustrated, and they learned the hard way just how valuable OP was. The next story from First Contribution 236. This happened several years ago and is a multi-year long story. I'll keep it as succinct as possible. We installed cameras in front of our home that were looking at our vehicles. Part of the camera angles did overlook parts of two neighbors' properties, one backyard and one side yard. The cameras were battery-operated and had a function where you could gray out areas that you didn't want to film. When motion occurred in the grayed out areas, the cameras would not be activated to film. The neighbors' entire properties and several bushes on our property were grayed out. We did this when installing them. One of the neighbors was a friend and had no issues with this whatsoever. We showed her the camera angle, and she said she didn't care whether or not we grayed out that area. We still left it grayed out over battery life concerns. The other neighbor's name was Karen. Not really, but we all know why I chose that name. Karen was on the HOA board, and, as you can imagine, we didn't get along with Karen or the HOA board. We told Karen about the camera and showed her the grayed out areas at the same time that we told our friendly neighbor about it. It was simply an FYI conversation. We're not on friendly terms, not an asking permission conversation. She told us to take the cameras down immediately, or we would regret it. About a week after we hung the camera up, we got a notice from our HOA that we were violating the bylaws. The bylaw in question? A nuisance to your neighbors bylaw. There wasn't a specific bylaw preventing placement of cameras, so this is all they could find to try to punish us. We responded with a letter detailing how we were not violating any bylaws or laws in general, and asked them to cease and desist. We all know how these stories go, though. They did not cease, and they did not desist. Their first response? The HOA has the right to enforce these bylaws. Try to stop us if you think you can. These types of responses were unfortunately quite common from this board. We entered this battle with one goal in mind: to cost them as much money and time as possible. The HOA hired a lawyer specifically to fight us. To my knowledge, this has not happened to any other residents. In the following 4 months, we ended up costing the HOA over $4,000 in lawyers' fees fighting this battle. For reference, the entire HOA income was approximately $25,000 per year. When it came time for our official HOA hearing over the matter, we had successfully postponed it, thanks to an attorney friend, 3 separate times. There were over 100 back-and-forth emails with the HOA attorney and ourselves. Each one of those emails was a 15-minute expense for the HOA, and I was happy to follow up a follow-up question with another follow-up question if it meant the HOA attorney was going to keep billing them. Did I say follow up enough times? We didn't actually want to take this battle to court, so we ended up removing the cameras the day of the hearing to prevent being fined, even if the fine wouldn't hold up in court. The HOA decided in the hearing that we were guilty, surprise, surprise, of violating the bylaw. They couldn't fine us, as the bylaws don't allow a fine until after a hearing has been held, and the cameras were already removed. In the end, the punishment was a sternly written piece of paper on the attorney's letterhead, delivered via certified mail, that stated that we were not allowed to place a camera on our home that had the potential to invade a neighbor's privacy. Keep in mind, the letter specifically stated the camera could not be placed on our home. We left the cameras off of the home for about 4 months, until the annual HOA meeting. You should have seen the look on the HOA board's faces when I asked them to explain the $4,000 line item for attorney's fees that simply stated, title searches, attorney fees. The board actually tried to hide the fact that they spent $4,000 trying to fight us over a couple of cameras by putting the fees in as title searches. Needless to say, that meeting did not go well for them. About half of them lost their positions on the board. The other half, including Karen, unfortunately, remained on the board. About a week after the annual meeting, we installed new cameras, facing the same direction as the prior cameras, only this time we installed a post in the ground and mounted the cameras to that post. The admonishment we received after the hearing specifically stated that we were not allowed to install cameras on our home, and said nothing about putting them on a post. They did send a letter to try to tell us to remove the cameras, but a sternly worded response indicating that we were prepared to fight them actually worked this time around. I guess they didn't want to spend another $4,000 fighting us. We didn't receive any follow-up responses, and the cameras on the post are still installed to this day, over 2 years and running strong. Several years ago, I installed battery-powered cameras on my home to monitor our vehicles, carefully graying out neighbors' properties. One neighbor was fine with it, but Karen, a hostile HOA board member, threatened us. The HOA cited a vague nuisance bylaw and hired a lawyer, spending over $4,000 fighting us. With help from an attorney friend, we delayed the hearing repeatedly, draining their budget with endless emails. Just before the hearing, we removed the cameras to avoid fines. The HOA sent a letter forbidding cameras on our home, so months later, we installed them on a post instead. At the annual meeting, I exposed the hidden legal fees, leading to half the board being replaced. The cameras are still up. This was malicious compliance at its finest, precise, patient, and punishing. OP followed the letter of their demands while exposing their incompetence, wasting their resources, and outsmarting their legal scare tactics. The cherry on top? OP's cameras are still standing strong. The HOA board asked me to remove my CCTV cameras. I played a way that led to half the board being replaced. Many corporate employees are fighting in a meeting. In the background, a young corporate employee is laughing. The next story from 3P Wood Guy, taking on my bullying boss. So last year, I'd been working for big UK telco as a senior technical reporter for 16 years. All was well, I was highly qualified. My job dealt with local government, so I had clearance, etc. I enjoyed it, and my company had supported me when I had to take 3 months off 2 years ago with a serious health condition. But then I got a new boss. We'll call her Helen. Helen was actually part of our wider team, a fellow reporter who was promoted. Actually, she was best friends with the senior manager, so the power went straight to her head, and she started reprimanding people for random things, like disrespect for questioning a process change which would double the time it took to do it, etc. She wanted to make her stamp on the job, despite it all working fine until then. Unable to deal with Helen, my colleague Jim hands his notice in. Jim is a technical architect, a role I did some years ago before taking a sideways move into reporting. His customer is huge, and it takes him forever to do his job, especially with all Helen's improvements. Before he leaves, I get called into an informal chat, which turned out to Helen informing me they're not backfilling Jim. They're making a cost saving, for which she will get a bonus. Instead, my role was to be, ta-da, a technical reporting architect for both customers. But that's 2 jobs, I point out. Which part of each are you proposing I drop to even make this remotely possible? We're not dropping anything. It's perfectly doable. But, despite whether you think is, I don't agree. I see Jim struggle every day. It's why he's leaving. I don't want to do 2 jobs. I have my health to think about. Oh, please, you're not so special. She is literally scoffing at me now. I must point out here that my serious health condition was PTSD and a nervous breakdown after having a baby, watching my dad have a stroke, my mom being in a coma following a massive heart attack, and a friend committing suicide. She then goes on to say she doesn't believe in mental health and I should prepare to have my handover from Jim. So I ask her to check with HR whether what she's doing is legal, as it's a change of role with no new contract. This really pisses her off. The meeting ends. A week later, she hauls me into a stress review meeting which, when I arrived, was a reprimand. In order to try and be as maliciously compliant as she could, she'd written down all 11 things I'm supposed to have done wrong. The idea being I'd end up being written up and, should I betray her again, fired. Some of my crimes were being miserable. Yes, I got in trouble for being sad. Refusing to take on Jim's role and being awkward due to my so-called health problems. She faked a customer complaint. Turns out I wasn't the only one she did this to. Not attending a meeting she ran weekly. I went back through my mail to find the email she'd sent me saying my attendance wasn't required as I used a different system due to my customer. She said I was skating on thin ice, and if I wasn't willing to pick up the extra work, then why come back at all after Christmas? This was late December. Okay then. Day after New Year's Day, I called in sick. She was right. I had no intention whatsoever of doing 2 jobs. I had 16 lovely weeks off with my family at full pay whilst I prepared all my evidence. Easy enough since she was stupid enough to mail it to me to take the company to court for bullying. Her manager and best friend would not reprimand her. It never got to court. The entire department was made redundant due to mismanagement, and on top of my redundancy package, I was paid for the remainder of the year plus all my holidays. I got a better paid job the day after I handed my laptop in. My new boss is absolutely lovely, and my new company treats me with respect, and I can see boats and ducks from my office window. She did not lose her job. Her friend promoted her to another department where she's universally hated and back to her old tricks, even going so far as to ring ex-employees' new managers to tell them they made a mistake hiring them, literally just to be a mean bitch. But hey, karma will get her in the end. Edited to add, all my colleagues were quite happy to be made redundant as they were on the verge of quitting, and all have secured better, friendlier jobs. This malicious compliance was masterful, calm, calculated, and poetic. OP followed her push to the letter, then used her own emails as evidence. 4 months paid leave, a solid payout, and a better job? OP walked out a winner,